tale. Peter Bull. There once lived in Denmark a peasant and his wife who owned a very good farm, but had no children. They often lamented to each other that they had no one of their own to inherit all the wealth they had possessed. They continued to prosper and became very rich people, but there was no heir to it all. One year it happened that they owned a pretty little bull calf which they called Peter. He was the prettiest little creature they had ever seen, so beautiful and so wise that it understood everything that was said to it, and so gentle and so full of play that both man and his wife came to be fond of it as if it had been their own child. One day the man said to his wife, "I wonder now whether our parish clerk could teach Peter to talk. In that case, we could not do better than to adopt him as our son and let him inherit all our possessions." "Well, I don't know," said his wife. "Our clerk is tremendously learned and knows much more than the paternoster. I could almost believe that he might be able to teach Peter to talk, for Peter has so wonderfully good head, too. You might at least ask him about it." Off went the man to the clerk and asked him whether he thought he could teach a bull calf they had to speak, for they wished to have it as their heir. The clerk was no fool. He looked around to see that no one could overhear him, and said, "Oh yes, I can easily do that, but you must not speak to anyone about it. It must be done in all secrecy, and the priest must not know about it, otherwise I shall get into trouble, for it is forbidden. It will also cost you something, as some very expensive books are required." That did not matter at all, the man said. They could not care so very much what it cost. The clerk could have $100 to begin with to buy the books. He also promised to tell no one about it and to bring the calf round in the evening. He gave the clerk the 100 on the spot, and in the evening took the calf around to him, and the clerk promised to do his best with it. In a week's time he came back to the clerk to hear about the calf and see how it had thriving. The clerk, however, said that he could not show the peasant man yet, for then Peter would long after him and forget all that he had already learned. He was getting on well with his learning, but another $100 were needed, as they must have more books. The peasant had the money with him, so he gave it to the clerk, and went home again in high hopes. In another week the man came again to learn the progress Peter had made. "He is getting along very well," said the clerk. "I suppose he can't say anything yet," said the man. "Oh, yes," said the clerk. "He can say moo now." "Do you think he will get on with his learning?" asked the peasant. "Oh, yes," said the clerk. "But I shall want another $100 for the books. Peter can't learn well out of the ones that he already has." "Well, well," said the to spend. What must be spent shall be spent. So he gave the clerk a third $100 for books, and a cask of good old ale for Peter. The clerk drank the ale himself and gave the calf milk, which he thought it would be better for him. Some weeks passed, during which the peasant did not come around to ask after the calf, being frightened lest it should cost him another $100, for he had begun to squirm a bit at having to part with so much money. Meanwhile, the clerk decided that the calf was as fat as it could be, so he killed it. After he got all the beef out of the way, he went inside and put on his black clothes and made his way to the peasant's house. As soon as the clerk had to say good day, he was asked, "Peter has come home yet?" "No, indeed he hasn't," said the man. "Surely he hasn't run away." "I hope," said the clerk, "that he would have not behaved so contemptibly after all the trouble I have had to teach him, and all that I have spent upon him. I had to spend at least $100 of my own money to buy books for him before I got him on so far. He could say anything he liked now, and he said today that he longed to see his parents again, and I was willing to give him that pleasure, but I was afraid that he wouldn't be able to find the way here by himself. So I made myself ready to go with him. When he got outside the house, I remembered that I had left my stick inside and went in again to get it. When I came out, Peter had gone off on his own account. I thought he would be here, and if he isn't, I don't know where he is." The peasant and his wife began to lament bitterly that Peter had run away in this fashion just when they were having so much joy with him, and after they had spent so much on his education. The worst of it was now they had no heir at all. The clerk comforted them as best he could. He was also greatly distressed that Peter should have behaved in such a way when he should have gained honor from his pupil. Perhaps he had only gone astray, and the clerk would advise him at the church next day, and find out where anyone had seen him. He then bade them goodbye and went home and dined on a good fat veal roast. So it happened that the clerk took in a newspaper, and one day he chanced to read its columns of a new merchant who had settled in a town some distance, whose name was Peter Bull. Now the newspaper in his pocket, and went round to sorrowing people who had lost their heir, and read the paragraph to them, and added, "I wonder now whether that could be your bull-calf Peter." "Of course it is," said the man. "Who else could it be?" His wife spoke up and said, "You must set out, good man, and see about him, for if it is him, I am perfectly certain. Take a good sum of money with you, too, for he knows what he might come to some cash now that he has turned merchant." The next day the man got a bag of money on his back, and a sandwich in his pocket, and a pipe in his mouth, and set out for the town where the new merchant lived. It was no short way, and he traveled for many days before he finally arrived there. He reached it one morning just at daybreak, and found out it was the right place, and asked if the merchant was home. Yes, he was, said the people, but he was not up yet. "That doesn't matter," said the peasants, "for I am his father. Just show me up to his bedroom." He was shown up to the room, and as soon as he entered it, he caught sight of the merchant, and recognized him at once. He had the same broad forehead, same thick neck, the same red hair, but in other aspects he was now like a human being. The peasant rushed straight up to him and took a firm hold of him. "Oh, Peter, what a sorrow you have caused us, both myself and your mother, by running off like this, just as you had just gotten well educated. Get up now, so that I can see you properly and have a talk with you." "All right," he said, "I shall do it at once." He got out of bed and made haste to dress himself. "Aye," said the peasant, "now I can see how clever our clerk is. He has done well by you, for now you look like a human being. If I didn't know once, I would never think that you had got you from the Red Cow. Will you just come home with me now?" "No," said the merchant, "I can't find time just now. I have a big business to look after." "You could have the farm at once, you know," said the peasant, "and we old people would retire. But if you would rather stay in business, of course you may do so. Are you in want of anything?" "I can well believe that," said the... "Oh, yes," said the merchant. "I want nothing so much as money. A merchant is always used for that." "I can well believe that," said the peasant, "for you had nothing at all to start with. I have brought some with me for that very end." With that he emptied his bag of money upon the table, so that it covered all with bright dollars. When the merchant saw what kind of man he had before him, he began to speak to him fairly, and invited him to stay with him a few days, so that they might have some more time to talk together. "Very well," said the peasant, "but you must call me father." "I have neither father nor mother alive," said Peter Bull. "I know that," said the man. "Your real father was sold at Hamburg last to Michaelmas. and your real mother died while calving in spring, but my wife and I have adopted you as our own, and you are our only heir. You must call me father." Peter the Bull was quite willing to do so, and it settled that he should keep the money, while the peasant made his will and left him to all that he had before he went home to his wife, and told her the whole story. She was so delighted to hear that it was true enough that Peter Bull, that he was no other than their own bull calf. "You must go at once and tell the clerk," she said, "and pay him the $100 of his own money that he spent on our son. He has earned them so much. And besides, for all the joy he has given us in having such a son and heir." The man agreed to this, and thanked the clerk for all he had done, and gave him $200, then sold the farm and removed his wife to the town where his dear son and heir was living. To him they gave all their wealth, and lived with him till their dying day.